In the unforgiving coliseum of modern culture, where the carefully constructed effigies of celebrity are paraded for public consumption, there exists no force more brutally effective, no weapon more utterly annihilating than satire. It is the great equalizer, the acid test of authenticity, a carnivalesque force of nature that does not debate a narrative but simply holds up a distorted mirror to it, forcing the subject and the world to gaze upon the absurdity within. For a brand built on the meticulous control of image, the relentless curation of perception, and the sovereign belief in its own importance, a direct hit from the master satirist at South Park is not merely a public relations crisis. It is a cultural immolation, an extinction-level event from which there is often no recovery. The recent episode, reportedly titled "Respect Our Pregnancy," was precisely such an event for Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex. This was not a glancing blow. It was a direct, targeted strike that, according to reports, left her and her husband, Prince Harry, as a worldwide laughingstock, the victims of a complete humiliation. The episode's genius and its cruelty lay in its perceived, scarily accurate portrayal of the couple's public-facing paradoxes. In the space of 22 animated minutes, the meticulously crafted facade of Brand Sussex, a delicate architecture of therapeutic grievance, aspirational wellness, and performative privacy, was not just critiqued. It was gleefully, systematically, and hilariously demolished. This was the moment the chasm between the Sussexes' self-perception and the public's growing skepticism was no longer a subject for royal commentators, but the punchline of a global joke. It was not the cause of her brand's fragility, but the catalyst that exposed it to the world in the most undeniable way possible. The episode, and Meghan's subsequent reported reaction of uncontrollable rage and panicked flight, signifies the catastrophic failure of a strategy built on narrative control in an uncontrollable world. It is a stark and cautionary tale of what happens when a public figure who demands attention, then screams when she gets it, collides with a cultural force that refuses to play by her rules. This was not merely a character assassination. It was the moment the character she had so carefully written was erased and replaced by a caricature she could not control, sparking a crisis from which her meticulously managed brand may never truly recover. To understand the depth of the crisis, one must first dissect the satirical weapons deployed by South Park. The show's creators, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, are masters of identifying the core hypocrisy at the center of a public persona and exaggerating it to its logical, absurd conclusion. In Meghan's case, they were presented with a target rich with contradictions that were already the subject of widespread public discourse. The episode did not need to invent flaws. It merely needed to animate them. The central satirical theme, the worldwide privacy tour, was the linchpin of the entire critique. This masterstroke of comedic framing perfectly captured the central paradox that has dogged the Sussexes since their departure from the royal family: the simultaneous, seemingly contradictory demand for absolute privacy and the relentless pursuit of public attention. The episode depicted its royal-esque characters storming into town with placards demanding privacy while simultaneously inviting news crews to document their every move. This was not just a joke. It was a devastatingly accurate visual representation of their strategy. Publishing a tell-all memoir, participating in a global Netflix docuseries, and giving countless interviews, all while lamenting the intrusion of the press. South Park simply took this existing hypocrisy and gave it a name and a visual identity, rendering it impossible to ignore. The critique deepened with its jabs at what it presented as performative and disingenuous personal branding. The reported inclusion of a moon bump or fake baby bump narrative was a particularly brutal and personal line of attack. While a baseless conspiracy theory in the real world, its inclusion in the satire served a powerful symbolic purpose. It suggested that, in the world of brand Meghan, nothing is sacred or authentic. Everything, even the profound experience of pregnancy and motherhood, is subject to being performed and curated for public consumption. It was a critique of what commentators called her brand-first empathy and performative parenting, where human experiences are framed as content opportunities. Furthermore, the episode reportedly savaged the commercial aspects of her brand, targeting tone-deaf brand deals and the bizarre promotional video for her American Riviera Orchard lifestyle brand, in which she was depicted twerking in the garden. This image, whether literal or metaphorical for the brand's perceived lack of substance and cringe-worthy attempts at relatability, was designed to highlight the vast gulf between the brand's lofty, aspirational rhetoric and its actual, often clumsy, execution. It painted a picture of a brand that was less about providing value and more about the narcissistic self-display of its founder. The devastating effectiveness of the episode lay in its ability to synthesize these disparate threads of public criticism into a single, cohesive, and hilarious narrative. It confirmed the audience's suspicions. It validated their skepticism. It took the quiet whispers of online forums and the pointed columns of royal watchers and broadcast them to a global audience in the most accessible format possible: a cartoon. The charge that the mockery was scarily accurate is the highest compliment a satirist can receive and the most damning indictment a public figure can endure. It means the caricature is now more believable than the reality. If the episode was a cultural earthquake, then the epicenter of the destruction was Meghan Markle's own psyche. The reports of her reaction, complete panic, uncontrollable rage, and being rendered inconsolable, paint a picture not of simple anger or embarrassment, but of a profound narcissistic injury. A narcissist's sense of self is often a fragile construct, a carefully polished mirror that reflects an idealized version of who they are. South Park did not just smudge that mirror. It shattered it into 1,000 pieces and forced her to look at the jagged, unflattering reflection. Her entire post-royal life has been an exercise in meticulous narrative control. From a sympathetic interview with Oprah Winfrey to the carefully edited Netflix series, she has been the author, editor, and protagonist of her own story. She controlled the lighting, the questions, the emotional tenor, and the final cut. South Park represents the total and catastrophic loss of that control. It was a narrative coup, an act of anarchic cultural terrorism against her sovereign state of self. The rage is the fury of a monarch whose authority has been successfully challenged by the court jesters, who have proven to be more powerful than her entire PR army. The detail about her allegedly lashing out at staff, blaming them for being caught off guard, is psychologically revealing. It speaks to an external locus of control, an inability to internalize failure or accept responsibility. In this reported mindset, the problem was not the inherent flaws in her public brand that made it such a ripe target for satire. The problem was that her defenses had been breached. Her Praetorian guard of agents and publicists had failed in their duty to protect her from the unpleasantness of public opinion. This reaction transforms a moment of potential self-reflection into an exercise in blame shifting, ensuring that no lessons will be learned. Her reported description of the episode as a personal attack and character assassination is equally telling. While undoubtedly hurtful, she fails to grasp the fundamental nature of satire. Satire does not attack a person, it attacks a persona. It critiques the public image, the hypocrisy, the self-importance. By viewing it as a purely personal assault, she reveals the extent to which she has conflated her own identity with her public brand. There is no separation. An attack on the brand is an attack on the self. This fusion of identity and image is the source of her power when the brand is ascendant, but it is the source of her utter devastation when the brand is successfully mocked. She has no private self to retreat into, for the private self has been fully commercialized and put on public display. The jesters did not break into her home. They simply held a mirror up to the stage she herself had built. The fallout from the episode was, according to reports, immediate, brutal, and worldwide. This was not just a social media storm. It was a catastrophic market correction for brand Meghan. In the world of celebrity endorsements and studio deals, perception is not just important. It is everything. A celebrity's value is tied to their cultural cachet, their aspirational quality, their cool factor. In a single stroke, South Park transformed Meghan from a controversial but still A-list cultural figure into the butt of a global joke. The contagion of ridicule is fatal to a brand built on aspirational luxury. The reports that multiple film studios began to cut ties with her or fire her, and that her Netflix projects were put on hold speak to a cold, hard business calculation. She was no longer a valuable asset. She had become a cultural liability. No studio wants to invest millions of dollars in a project fronted by someone who is now synonymous with a worldwide privacy tour. No brand wants to align itself with a figure whose name now elicits a snicker rather than admiration. Her brand had become too volatile, too susceptible to the kind of mockery that could tarnish any project with which she was associated. The immediate stalling of her American Riviera Orchard brand was the most direct consequence. A lifestyle brand, more than any other venture, relies on the credibility and aspirational appeal of its founder. It asks consumers to buy into a worldview, a sense of taste, a particular aesthetic. When the founder of that brand has been successfully defined in the public imagination as a hypocritical, out of touch, and slightly ridiculous figure, the entire enterprise is compromised. Who wants to buy luxury from a laughingstock? The brand's foundations, already shaky due to a lack of clear products or strategy, were completely washed away by the tidal wave of mockery. The hashtags that trended globally were not just online chatter. They were real-time market research, demonstrating a catastrophic collapse in public sentiment. The South Park episode did not create this sentiment out of thin air. It tapped into a pre-existing well of public fatigue and skepticism towards the Sussexes. The years of perceived contradictions, the tell-all interviews, the constant low-level drama, all of it had created a fertile ground for satire to take root. South Park was not the spark that started the fire. It was the gallon of gasoline thrown onto the embers, causing a conflagration that consumed the entire commercial structure she had been trying to build. In the face of this unprecedented brand crisis, Meghan's reported response was not to confront the critique, adapt her strategy, or engage in a period of quiet reflection. Instead, she chose flight. The decision to flee to Dubai in a state of self-imposed exile is one of the most psychologically and strategically revealing moves of her career. It is an admission of defeat on her home turf, a tacit acknowledgement that she had lost control of the narrative in the Western media landscape. The choice of Dubai is profoundly symbolic. She was not retreating to a quiet corner of the world to heal and regroup. She was relocating to a global hub of immense wealth, luxury, and, most importantly, tightly controlled media. In Dubai, there is no South Park. There is no First Amendment protecting satirists. Public image is meticulously managed, and dissent is not tolerated. It is, in essence, a safe space for the mega-rich and image-conscious, a gilded cage where she could be shielded from the harsh realities of public opinion in a democratic society. Her reported goal was to rebuild her brand as a figure of global luxury, focusing on wellness, fashion, and philanthropy in the Middle East. This is a classic branding pivot. When one market rejects you, you seek another. However, as media analysts cited in the reports shrewdly noted, a new location doesn't erase an old narrative. The idea that she could simply reboot her image in a different geographical setting demonstrates a naive misunderstanding of the global, interconnected nature of modern media. The worldwide privacy tour caricature will follow her wherever she goes. The flight to Dubai can be seen as the ultimate expression of her core strategy. When reality becomes uncomfortable, retreat into a more controllable, curated environment. She could not control the satirists in Hollywood, so she has fled to an environment where such dissent doesn't exist. It is a desperate attempt to recreate the echo chamber of Montecito on a global scale. However, this move risks further alienating her remaining Western audience, as it can be perceived as an abandonment of the very culture she sought to influence in a flight to a region whose values on free speech and women's rights are often at odds with the progressive ideals she publicly espouses. Perhaps the most tragic subplot in this entire saga is the reported state of Prince Harry. While Meghan fled to Dubai to salvage her brand, Harry was reportedly left behind in Montecito, caring for the children and running the Archwell operations alone. The descriptions of him as depressed, confused, and emotionally exhausted paint a portrait of a man unmoored, the collateral damage in the explosion of his wife's ambition. This narrative reinforces the perception that has been growing for years that in the partnership of the Sussexes, Meghan is the undisputed strategist and driving force, while Harry is the emotional, often volatile, asset whose primary role is to provide the royal legitimacy and traumatic backstory for their shared brand. The report that he was cut out of the decision for Meghan to leave is a damning indictment of the state of their partnership. It shatters the carefully cultivated image of a couple united against the world and replaces it with a picture of a transactional alliance, where one partner makes unilateral decisions that leave the other isolated and powerless. His reported confusion and exhaustion are understandable. He has sacrificed everything for this new life: his family, his country, his military titles, and his reputation. He did so, presumably, in the belief that he was escaping a toxic environment to build a more authentic and impactful life with his partner. Now, he finds himself in a situation where their joint venture is a global laughingstock. His wife has fled the country, and he is left to manage the wreckage. The fears among their inner circle of an imminent public separation seem not just plausible, but almost inevitable under such intense and divergent pressures. He is a man who has burned every bridge behind him, only to find that the island he has landed on is crumbling into the sea. To fully grasp the situation, one must understand the philosophy of the antagonists. Co-creator Matt Stone's reported comments provide the perfect manifesto for their work. He stated they satirize people who want to be taken seriously to an excessive degree. Meghan Markle, in this regard, was the perfect target. She does not just present a brand. She presents it with an air of profound self-importance and moral gravity. Stone's assertion that she made herself a target by demanding attention, then screaming when she gets it, is the core of the issue. She courted the global spotlight with an almost insatiable appetite, but she wanted to dictate the terms of that attention completely. She wanted the adoration without the scrutiny, the power without the accountability, the platform without the possibility of being ridiculed. This misunderstanding of the fundamental contract of modern celebrity is at the heart of her final, desperate, and futile reported action: the legal threat. The news that her legal team contacted Paramount and Comedy Central to have the episode edited or removed is a stunning display of naivete and hubris. It demonstrates a profound failure to understand the culture of the country she chose as her home. The First Amendment and the long-established legal protections for satire and parody are cornerstones of American free speech. The demand was immediately and correctly dismissed by media lawyers. But the legal failure was secondary to the public relations disaster it created. The act of threatening to sue a cartoon for making fun of you is perhaps the single most effective way to prove the cartoon's point. It made her look even more desperate, a far-removed celebrity with no real ideals. It reinforced the very caricature she was trying to erase, that of a thin-skinned, manipulative, and self-important figure who cannot take a joke. It was the final, flailing punch of a fighter who had already been knocked out. In the final analysis, the South Park episode was not the cause of Meghan Markle's brand crisis. It was merely its most brilliant and brutal diagnosis. The show's creators held up a mirror, and the reflection it showed was not of a global humanitarian or an aspirational lifestyle guru, but of a walking, talking paradox. The brand, which had been so meticulously controlled and fiercely protected, is now reported to be spiraling into an unprecedented crisis. Her flight to Dubai is not a solution. It is a symptom of the deeper problem. It is a retreat into a controlled reality, an attempt to build a new kingdom on foreign soil, because her own has been lost. But the narrative of ridicule is a persistent ghost that will not be confined by geography. The fundamental problem remains: a chasm between the noble, important, and authentic self she projects and the hypocritical, vacuous, and manipulative persona that a significant portion of the global public now perceives. Can she recover? It is the great, unanswered question. Perhaps a period of genuine, quiet reflection away from the cameras and the brand deals could begin a process of rebuilding. But her reported actions, the rage, the blame, the flight, the legal threats, suggest that such self-awareness is tragically absent. She remains the protagonist of a story in which she is the sole victim, unable to see her own role in the drama's tragic turns. The South Park episode may well be remembered as the beginning of the end of her influence in Western media. The moment the jester toppled the queen and the carefully constructed kingdom of brand Meghan proved to be little more than a house of cards and a hurricane of ridicule.